The morning sun cast long shadows across the cornfields as Jake Miller finished his daily rounds. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel of his old pickup truck, the engine making that familiar rumble that had been his companion for the past 15 years. At 62 years old, Jake had spent his entire life working the same 500 acres of farmland that his father and grandfather had worked before him. Most people in Millfield County knew Jake as a simple farmer. They saw him at the local diner every Wednesday morning, always ordering the same black coffee and scrambled eggs. They waved when his dusty truck passed by on the county roads. To them, he was just another hard-working farmer trying to make ends meet in an increasingly difficult agricultural economy. But Jake had a secret that nobody in his small town knew about. 3 years ago, Jake had made a discovery on his property that changed everything. While digging a new well near the back 40, his equipment had struck something unusual. What started as a simple water well project turned into the discovery of a massive natural gas deposit beneath his farmland. After months of legal paperwork, geological surveys, and negotiations with energy companies, Jake had quietly become one of the wealthiest men in the state. The irony wasn't lost on him. For decades, he had struggled to keep the farm profitable. He had taken out loans against the property, worked 16-hour days during harvest season, and watched as younger farmers gave up and sold their land to developers. Now, at an age when most men were thinking about retirement, Jake found himself with more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Despite his newfound wealth, Jake had made a conscious decision to maintain his simple lifestyle. He still wore the same work clothes, drove the same truck, and lived in the same modest farmhouse where he had raised his children. His wife, Martha, had passed away 5 years earlier, and his 2 children lived in distant cities with families of their own. The farm had become both his sanctuary and his prison, but today was different. Today, Jake was going to do something that would either bring him great joy or confirm his worst fears about how people treated those they perceived as beneath them. Jake had decided to buy an airplane, not just any airplane, but a brand new private jet. He had been thinking about it for months. With Martha gone and his children living far away, Jake found himself increasingly isolated. Commercial flights were uncomfortable and time-consuming. A private jet would allow him to visit his grandchildren more frequently and perhaps even take some of the trips he and Martha had always planned but never taken. The decision to buy the jet wasn't entirely practical, though. Part of it was curiosity. Jake wanted to see how people would react when a simple farmer walked into an upscale dealership and asked to purchase a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Would they treat him with respect, or would they judge him based on his appearance and assume he was wasting their time? Jake parked his pickup truck in the parking lot of Premier Aviation, the most exclusive aircraft dealership within a 200-mile radius. The building was modern glass and steel, with several sleek jets displayed on the tarmac behind it. Even from the parking lot, Jake could see that everything about this place screamed luxury and exclusivity. He checked his reflection in the truck's side mirror. His gray hair was neatly combed, but his face showed the deep lines and sun damage of someone who had spent decades working outdoors. He wore his cleanest pair of jeans, work boots that he had polished that morning, and a button-down shirt that Martha had bought him years ago. By his standards, he was dressed appropriately for an important occasion. By the standards of Premier Aviation's typical clientele, he probably looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong building. The moment Jake walked through the glass doors, he could feel eyes on him. The reception area was designed to impress, with marble floors, leather furniture, and walls lined with photographs of various aircraft. A young woman sat behind a curved reception desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but clearly questioning whether Jake belonged there. "I'd like to speak with someone about purchasing an aircraft," Jake said simply. The receptionist's eyebrows raised slightly. She glanced at his clothing, then at her computer screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I don't. But I'm serious about making a purchase today." I see. "Well, all of our sales representatives are quite busy, but let me see if someone might have a few minutes to speak with you." Jake noticed that she didn't ask for his name or offer him a seat. Instead, she made a brief phone call, speaking in hushed tones while glancing at him occasionally. After a few minutes, a man in an expensive suit approached from the back offices. He was perhaps 40 years old, with perfectly styled hair and a watch that Jake estimated cost more than most people's annual salary. "I'm Brad Hutchins, senior sales consultant," the man said, extending his hand. "I understand you're interested in aircraft ownership." Jake shook his hand. "That's right, I'm looking to purchase a jet." Brad's smile was professional but strained. "Wonderful. And what type of flying experience do you have?" "I've been a licensed pilot for 37 years, Jake replied. "Started with crop dusters, moved up to twin-engine aircraft for agricultural survey work." This seemed to surprise Brad slightly. "I see. And what's your budget range for this purchase?" Jake had expected this question. He knew that in a place like this, they would want to qualify him financially before wasting time showing him expensive aircraft. "I'm prepared to spend up to $20 million, Jake said matter-of-factly. Brad's expression didn't change, but Jake caught the subtle glance he exchanged with the receptionist. $20 million was serious money, but Jake's appearance clearly didn't match their expectations of someone with that kind of budget. "That's quite a substantial investment," Brad said carefully. "Perhaps we should start by discussing your specific needs. How many passengers will you typically be carrying? What kind of range are you looking for? Will this be primarily for business or personal use?" Jake appreciated that Brad was at least asking the right questions, even if his tone suggested skepticism. "Personal use primarily. I want to visit my family more often and maybe do some traveling. I'd need seating for about 8 people, though most trips would be just me or me and a few guests. Range should be enough to get from here to either coast without refueling." Brad nodded and gestured toward a seating area. "Let's sit down and I can show you some brochures. We have several models that might meet your requirements." As they sat down, Jake noticed 2 other sales representatives watching them from across the showroom. One of them, a woman in her 30s, was showing a well-dressed couple around what appeared to be a very expensive jet. The contrast was obvious. That couple was receiving the full VIP treatment, while Jake was getting the minimal courtesy extended to someone they weren't entirely sure belonged there. Brad opened a folder and spread several glossy brochures on the coffee table. "These are our most popular models in your price range. This is the Citation X Plus, excellent for cross-country travel. This is the Challenger 350, very popular with executives. And this is the Global 6000, which might be at the top of your budget but offers exceptional range and luxury." Jake studied the brochures carefully. The aircraft were beautiful, and the specifications were impressive. But he was also studying Brad's behavior. The sales consultant was going through the motions, but there was something perfunctory about his presentation. It felt like he was humoring Jake rather than genuinely trying to sell him an airplane. "The Global 6000 looks interesting," Jake said. "What would be the total cost with typical options and delivery?" Brad consulted his tablet. "With popular options and current delivery schedules, you're looking at approximately $18.5 million, delivered in about 14 months. 14 months seems like a long time," Jake observed. "Unfortunately, that's fairly standard for custom orders. These aircraft are built to very precise specifications, and there's quite a waiting list." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "And if I wanted something sooner?" "We do occasionally have cancellations or demo aircraft available, but those opportunities are quite rare and typically go to our established clients first." There it was. The polite way of saying that Jake, despite claiming to have a $20 million budget, was not considered an established client and would therefore wait in line behind more preferred customers. "I understand," Jake said. "Could I see one of these aircraft? Maybe sit inside, get a feel for the layout?" Brad hesitated for just a moment. "Of course. We have a Citation on the ramp that I could show you, though it's not equipped with all the latest options." As they walked toward the aircraft display area, Jake overheard part of a conversation between the female sales representative and her well-dressed clients. "We can absolutely have that delivered within 6 months, Mr. Patterson. Your relationship with Premier Aviation means we can prioritize your order. Jake filed that information away. 6 months for preferred customers, 14 months for farmers who walked in off the street. The citation was indeed impressive. The interior was luxurious leather and polished wood, with seating for 8 passengers and all the amenities one could want at 40,000 feet. Jake examined everything carefully, asking technical questions about avionics. Brad Hutchins took a deep breath and looked around the conference room at his colleagues and superiors. Jake Miller sat quietly, waiting for the sales consultant to explain what had happened during their first meeting. "Mr. Miller visited us on Tuesday afternoon," Brad began reluctantly. "He said he was interested in purchasing an aircraft. A Global 6000 specifically? He claimed to have a $20 million budget and said he would pay cash." "And what did you do?" Mr. Whitmore asked. Well, I showed him some brochures and took him out to see the citation on the ramp." "Did you show him a Global 6000? "No, sir. We didn't have one available for viewing at the time." Jake spoke up quietly. "That's not entirely accurate, Brad. You had a Global 6000 on the ramp." "I could see it from the window." "But you told me it was being prepared for delivery to another customer." Brad's face reddened further. "That's true. But it was being prepared, For Mr. Patterson," Jake continued. "I overheard your colleague mention that. Mr. Patterson's relationship with Premier Aviation meant his order could be prioritized." The room fell silent. Mr. Whitmore's expression grew increasingly stern as he processed what he was hearing. "Let me understand this correctly," Mr. Whitmore said slowly. "Mr. Miller came here with a $20 million cash budget, and you showed him brochures and a citation instead of our best available aircraft?" "Sir, given his appearance, I thought it was appropriate to start with more modest options. His appearance?" The third executive spoke up for the first time. "Mr. Hutchins, are you telling us that you make sales decisions based on how customers are dressed?" Jake decided it was time to reveal the rest of his story. "Gentlemen, I think we need to put this situation in perspective. Brad's treatment of me wasn't just poor customer service. It was based on assumptions that were spectacularly wrong." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. "I brought some additional documentation that might interest you." Jake opened the folder and spread several papers on the conference table. The first was a detailed financial statement from his accounting firm, showing assets that made even the bank letter look conservative. Mr. Whitmore picked up the statement and his eyes widened as he scanned the numbers. "Mr. Miller, this shows liquid assets of over $500 million. "That's correct. The natural gas discovery on my property has been quite profitable." Jake laid out the second document. "This is a letter from the governor's office, thanking me for my $20 million contribution to the state's Rural Development Fund." The third document was even more impressive. "And this is a letter from the Pentagon, expressing appreciation for my donation of $50 million worth of equipment to our military bases in Afghanistan and Iraq." The executives passed the documents around the table, their expressions growing more shocked with each revelation. "You see, gentlemen," Jake continued, "I'm not just a farmer with some extra money. Over the past 3 years, I've donated over $200 million to various causes. I've funded 3 rural hospitals, built a new school in my county, and established scholarship programs at 5 universities. But apparently none of that matters if you're wearing work clothes when you walk into Premier Aviation." Mr. Whitmore looked like he had been physically struck. "Mr. Miller, we had no idea. Double course you didn't, because you didn't bother to find out who I was before deciding I wasn't worth your time." Jake's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. "Do you want to know the real irony here? I didn't just discover natural gas on my property. I discovered one of the largest reserves in North America. The initial deal was worth $800 million. The ongoing royalties will be worth billions over the next decades." Jake reached into his folder again and pulled out a newspaper clipping. "This article from the Wall Street Journal calls it the most significant energy discovery of the decade. but I suppose none of you read about it. Because why would you care about some farmer in the middle of nowhere? The silence in the room was deafening. Jake could see the executives trying to process the magnitude of their mistake. There's something else you should know, Jake continued. My late wife Martha worked for the State Department for 30 years. She was involved in negotiating several international aviation agreements. I've been to more countries than most people can name, and I've seen every type of aircraft in service. When I ask technical questions about avionics and maintenance, it's not because I'm trying to impress you. It's because I actually know what I'm talking about. Robert Chun spoke up for the first time since the introductions. Jake, maybe you should tell them about your military service. Jake nodded. 22 years in the Air Force, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. I flew everything from cargo planes to fighter jets. I have more flight hours than your entire sales staff combined. But I suppose none of that occurred to anyone here, because I must just be a simple farmer who doesn't understand sophisticated aircraft. Mr. Whitmore looked physically ill. Mr. Miller, I cannot apologize enough for how you were treated. This is absolutely not how Premier Aviation operates, isn't it? Jake asked quietly. Because from where I sit, it looks exactly like how Premier Aviation operates. You have one level of service for people who look wealthy, and another level for people who don't. The only question is whether you're going to change that policy, or continue to risk losing customers who might not be what they appear to be. Jake stood up and walked to the window overlooking the aircraft ramp. Do you see that hangar over there? The one with the Global 7500 parked outside? The executives looked where he was pointing. I purchased that facility 6 months ago. I've been converting it into a private maintenance base for my aviation activities. I was planning to make Premier Aviation my preferred supplier for aircraft and parts. I was also considering hiring your maintenance team to service my fleet. He turned back to face the room. The facility purchase was $42 million. The equipment installation was another $18 million. I was prepared to spend approximately $200 million over the next 5 years, building a comprehensive aviation operation. Premier Aviation would have been the primary beneficiary of that investment. The financial implications of what Jake was saying hit the room like a physical blow. Mr. Whitmore looked like he might actually faint. Would have been? Mr. Whitmore asked weakly. Past tense, yes. Because after Tuesday's experience, I started looking at other options. There are several aircraft dealers who would be very happy to earn my business. Some of them have already made quite attractive proposals. Jake returned to his seat and looked directly at Brad. Brad, I want you to understand something. Your treatment of me wasn't just rude. It was expensive. Very expensive. He pulled out his phone and showed the screen to the group. While you were preparing your overpriced proposal with extended delivery times, I was having conversations with your competitors. This email is from Jet Aviation in Switzerland. They're prepared to deliver 3 aircraft within 4 months and provide comprehensive maintenance services at my facility. Total package value, $180 million. The phone was passed around the table. Jake could see the shock on their faces as they realized the magnitude of the opportunity they had potentially lost. The German manufacturer Lufthansa Technik sent this proposal yesterday, Jake continued, showing another email. $210 million for aircraft and a complete maintenance operation. Delivery in 6 months? Mr. Whitmore finally found his voice. Mr. Miller, please. There must be something we can do to make this right. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the conference room. Actually, Mr. Whitmore, there is something you can do. Name it anything. I want you to implement a company-wide policy change. I want every employee at Premier Aviation to understand that customers are to be treated with equal respect regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived wealth. I want training programs that teach your staff to never judge a customer's capability based on how they dress or what kind of car they drive. Jake paused and looked around the room. And I want Brad to be personally responsible for implementing this policy. Brad looked surprised. Sir? You made the mistake, Brad. You should be the one to ensure it never happens again. I want you to develop a training program that teaches other salespeople to avoid the assumptions you made about me. Use this situation as a teaching example." Mr. Whitmore nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. We can have that implemented within 30 days. "There's one more thing," Jake said. "I want Premier Aviation to establish a customer service guarantee. If any customer feels they've been treated unfairly based on their appearance or background, they get automatic priority service and a significant discount on their purchase." "Done," Mr. Whitmore said immediately. Jake stood up again and walked back to the window. "In that case, gentlemen, let's talk about aircraft purchases." The relief in the room was palpable. "I still need a personal aircraft. Global 6000, fully equipped. When can you deliver it?" 8 weeks, Mr. Whitmore said without hesitation. "I'll personally oversee the order." "Excellent. I also need 3 additional aircraft for the charter operation I'm establishing. 2 mid-sized jets and 1 large cabin aircraft. What can you recommend? For the next 2 hours or—" 3 days later, Jake Miller sat at his kitchen table, carefully reviewing the proposal that Brad Hutchins had emailed him from Premier Aviation. The document was professionally prepared, but Jake could read between the lines. The pricing was higher than what Brad had quoted during their meeting. The delivery timeline had somehow stretched to 16 months, and the financing terms took up more space than the aircraft specifications. Most telling of all was the tone of the cover letter, which suggested that Jake might want to consider more affordable options and recommended he speak with their financing specialist about creative payment solutions. It was clear that despite his claim of having a $20 million budget, the sales team at Premier Aviation still believed they were dealing with someone who was financially overextended. Jake set the proposal aside and picked up his phone. He had some calls to make before his return visit to the dealership. The first call was to his attorney, Robert Chun, who had handled all the legal work related to Jake's gas rights deal. Robert was one of the few people who fully understood the scope of Jake's new wealth. "Jake, good to hear from you," Robert said when he answered. "How are things on the farm?" "Profitable," Jake replied with a slight smile. "Listen, Robert, I need you to do something for me. I want you to call Premier Aviation and set up a meeting for me. Don't mention my name yet. Just tell them you represent a client who is interested in purchasing multiple aircraft for a new charter service." "Multiple aircraft?" "Jake, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to conduct a little experiment in human nature," Jake said. "Can you do this for me?" "Of course. When do you want this meeting?" "Tomorrow afternoon, if possible." "And Robert, when you call, make it clear that your client is looking to spend between $50 and $100 million. Robert whistled softly. "That's serious money, even for you. Are you actually considering starting a charter service?" "Maybe, or maybe I just want to see how differently they treat customers when they think there's real money involved." The second call Jake made was to his banker Susan Wells at First National. Susan had nearly fainted when Jake first deposited the initial payment from the gas rights deal, and she had been helping him manage his newfound wealth ever since. "Susan, I need you to prepare a letter for me," Jake said. "Something on bank letterhead that confirms my account balance and ability to make large cash purchases." "How large are we talking, Jake?" "Let's say it confirms I have liquid assets sufficient to purchase aircraft valued at up to $100 million. "Good heavens, Jake, are you buying an airline?" "Just one airplane, maybe. It's complicated." After finishing his calls, Jake spent the rest of the day working on his farm. The routine physical labor helped him think clearly. By evening, he had formulated his plan. The next afternoon, Jake drove back to Premier Aviation, but this time he parked in a different location and observed the building for 30 minutes before going inside. He wanted to see how they treated Robert when he arrived for the appointment. At exactly 2 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Robert Chun stepped out, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Jake watched through binoculars as Robert entered the building, even from the parking lot. Jake could see the difference in reception. The front door was held open for Robert. Multiple staff members appeared immediately. Within minutes, Robert was escorted to what appeared to be a private conference room, and Jake could see several people in suits gathering for what was, obviously considered an important meeting. Jake waited exactly 1 hour before making his own entrance when he walked through the front doors of Premier Aviation for the second time. The same receptionist was at her desk. She looked up with the same politely questioning expression she had worn 3 days earlier. "Oh, hello again," she said. "Are you here to see Brad about your proposal?" "Actually, I'm here about a different matter," Jake said. "I believe my attorney is meeting with your team about a charter service opportunity." The receptionist's expression shifted to confusion. "Your attorney?" "Robert Chun. He should be in a meeting right now discussing aircraft purchases for a new charter operation." The young woman's eyes widened slightly as she made the connection. She glanced at her computer screen, then back at Jake, clearly uncertain how to process this information. I'll need to check on that," she stammered, before she could make a phone call. Brad Hutchins emerged from the back offices, walking quickly toward the reception area. His expression suggested he had been alerted to Jake's presence and was coming to intercept him before he could disrupt whatever important meeting was taking place. "Jake," Brad said with forced enthusiasm, "what brings you back so soon? I thought we were going to discuss the proposal over the phone." "Well, Brad, it turns out we have more to discuss than I originally thought," Jake said calmly. "I understand my attorney is here meeting with your team?" Brad's confident expression faltered. "Your attorney?" "Robert Chun. He's discussing aircraft purchases for a charter service I'm considering starting." The color drained from Brad's face as he processed this information. Jake could almost see the wheels turning as the sales consultant realized the implications of what he was hearing. "There must be some misunderstanding," Brad said carefully. "Mr. Chun is meeting with our senior management team about a very substantial corporate transaction." "No misunderstanding," Jake replied. "I asked him to set up that meeting. You see, Brad, after reviewing your proposal, I started thinking bigger. Why buy one aircraft when I could buy 10? Why limit myself to personal use when I could create a business?" At that moment, the conference room doors opened, and Robert Chun emerged with 3 men in expensive suits whom Jake didn't recognize. They were clearly Premier Aviation's senior executives, brought in to handle what they believed was a major corporate client. Robert spotted Jake immediately and walked over with a slight smile on his face. "Gentlemen," Robert said, addressing the group of executives, "I'd like you to meet my client, Jake Miller." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could see the executives looking him up and down, taking in his work clothes and weathered appearance, clearly struggling to reconcile what they were seeing with what they had been told about his purchasing power. The tallest of the executives, a man with silver hair in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, stepped forward first. "Mr. Miller," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Whitmore, president of Premier Aviation. Your attorney has been telling us about your charter service plans." Jake shook his hand firmly. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Whitmore, though I have to say, I'm a bit surprised. This is our first meeting, considering I was here earlier this week looking to purchase an aircraft." Another uncomfortable silence. Brad Hutchins looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "You were here earlier this week?" Mr. Whitmore asked, glancing at Brad. "Tuesday afternoon," Jake confirmed. "I spoke with Brad about purchasing a Global 6000, $20 million budget, cash purchase. Perhaps Brad mentioned it to you?" All eyes turned to Brad, whose face was now completely red. It was clear that he had not mentioned Jake's visit to his superiors, presumably because he hadn't taken it seriously. "Well, yes, we did discuss ... double quote stammered. "What Mr. Hutchins told me," Jake continued calmly, "was that delivery would take 14 to 16 months, and he recommended I consider financing options and more affordable alternatives." Mr. Whitmore's expression darkened as he looked at Brad. 16 months? For a cash customer? "Well, sir, given the circumstances, double quote Brad began. What circumstances? Mr. Whitmore demanded. Jake decided to help Brad out. I think Brad was being cautious because I don't look like your typical customer. I'm a farmer, Mr. Whitmore. I wear work clothes and drive an old pickup truck. When someone like me walks into a place like this, it's natural to assume I might be wasting your time. The group of executives exchanged glances. Jake could see them trying to figure out how to handle this delicate situation. Mr. Miller, said the second executive, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. At Premier Aviation, we treat all potential customers with equal respect regardless of their background or appearance. Do you? Jake asked mildly. Because when I was here Tuesday, I was shown a single aircraft and given a standard sales presentation. Today, my attorney was immediately ushered into your conference room and met with your entire executive team. The only difference is that Tuesday you thought I was a farmer looking to buy one airplane. And today you thought he was representing a corporation looking to buy 10 airplanes. The truth of Jake's observation hung in the air. There was no denying the difference in treatment he was describing. Mr. Miller, Mr. Whitmore said carefully, I apologize if your initial visit didn't meet our usual standards. Perhaps we could start over? I'd be happy to personally show you our full inventory and discuss how we can meet your needs. That's very kind of you, Jake said. But first, I think we should address the elephant in the room. Brad told me that delivery of a Global 6000 would take 14 to 16 months. But when my attorney mentioned a fleet purchase, you indicated that multiple aircraft could be delivered within 6 to 8 months. How do you explain that discrepancy? Mr.